Hi, I'm Jeremy. In 1968, there was a race, a deadly sailboat race around the world. It would depart Europe, go down the Atlantic and into the Southern Ocean, past the tips of Africa, Australia, and South America, and back up to the starting point. Now, the Southern Ocean is as inhospitable as they come, particularly when passing by Cape Horn through the Drake Strait in that gap between South America and Antarctica. This is the 40th and 50th parallels, known as the Roaring Forties and Furious Fifties, where the water in storms can stir up 80-foot waves and 60-mile-an-hour winds, making your boat feel like the size of a pinhead and tossing you into what has become known as the graveyard of the sea. It would take 8 to 10 months to complete this race. And what was unique about this race was that the sailors who chose to compete had to sail alone, solo, and were not allowed to stop at any point at land or in port along the way. Not for rest, not for provisions, not for repairs, not even for mail from their loved ones back at home. This had never been done before by anyone. For adventurers, this was a holy grail. This was the Mount Everest for sailors. 9 men arrived for the challenge. We can do difficult things, you and I. I'm not suggesting we do difficult things because they're difficult, but because they're worth it. Now, I know that difficult and worth it are relative terms. What's difficult for me might not be difficult for you, and what's worth it to you might not be worth it to me. But when it's worth it, we can do difficult things. These 9 men were very different people from one another, and they each showed up with very different sailboats and with very different levels of skill and experience on the water. But to each of them, this was worth it. They knew enough to know about the dangers and risks of the trip, and each did their best to prepare and equip for the hardships to be endured. Hardships both known and completely unknown. But they were also each completely enthusiastic about the idea of what this was. The book that tells their story is called A Voyage for Madmen by Peter Nichols, and I found it by total and complete accident, but I couldn't put it down. I chose to read it because of the adventure, but I loved it because of how it challenged me to think about myself and what I'm willing to do or not do. When we do difficult things, they don't have to be on the global stage like a race around the world. We can do difficult things in our household, at our work, and in our communities to achieve certain worthwhile goals. What fascinates me about the story of the race is what happens to these 9 men when hardships arise. They're sailing by themselves and keeping logs of their experiences so we can essentially read their thoughts from when they're in the worst of it. When they have to dive into frigid cold water to fix a leak under the boat or tend to their own injuries with these primitive first aid kits they bring, or navigate a storm that is thrashing their boat and threatening their life. These sailing logs and journals are so introspective. In each of them, there's this magnetism back towards land, where it's dry, safe, and accommodating, where no one would question them for bailing out of the race. You did the best you should, you could. We're proud of you for trying. These are things that friends would say, and they would mean it. I could have never gotten as far as you did. It's still impressive what you've done, even if you didn't finish. These are reasonable observations and consolations. But when you're out there on the water alone, assessing the situation, licking your wounds from the latest battle, calculating the risks that remain, and if it's all still intact, your equipment, your health, your skill, and your risk tolerance, bent but not broke, and all you have to do is to continue to endure, then the only question that's left is about you. Do you turn towards land or press on? Can you find enjoyment in the challenges and reward in the small wins? Can you weather the setbacks and outsmart the risks yet to come? We don't have to do difficult things, you and I, but we can. And the reward for doing so are often greater than the prize at the end of the race. We're often changed ourselves for the better because of it. I just found this story and this thought fascinating and motivating. Maybe you will too. Until next time.